This morning we are here at the Kingsport Farmers Market to ask shoppers a few questions about the topic of recidivism. Do you know what the term recidivism means?
No, I do not.
No, I don't know.
I actually have no idea.
I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I really don't know.
I told you before, I don't know what recidivism means.
I actually just learned this, and it turns out it's when an incarcerated person gets out and then continues to go back into the system.
You know, recidivism is a kind of a big word to a lot of people, I guess, but basically it's just those people just keep coming back.
The barriers to reentry are so enormous and so stacked against the person that it's actually surprising the recidivism rate isn't higher.
If I don't carry this card with me at all times, I go back to prison immediately.
Usually when we start talking about the history of prisons, we go back to about 1820 or so. Pennsylvania had the Eastern State Penitentiary. New York kind of started with the Auburn prison in upstate New York. Both prisons were very focused on religion. In fact, they were called reformatories. And it was hoped that after they had been in prison for a few years and thought about their ways, prayed, they would be reformed. Later in the century, later in the 1800s, specifically around 1870, we had the first prison congress in Cincinnati, Ohio. And this is usually kind of marked as the beginning of an emphasis on rehabilitation, that here we're starting to think about new directions in prison, changing prisoners, rehabilitating them. Somewhere in the 1970s or so, there was kind of a disillusionment with rehabilitation. A famous report came out by a criminologist by the name of Martinson, and it raised some questions about the effectiveness of parole, probation, and prison programs. So in the last 25 years or so, there has been this get tough area. We've been putting more people in prison. We've also been making it tougher to get out.
This is one area where we cannot have budget cuts, because we must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs.
Those who commit crimes should be punished, and those who commit repeated violent crimes should be told. When you commit a third violent crime, you will be put away and put away for good. 3 strikes and you are out.
The criminal justice system in the United States has evolved over time, but I wouldn't say that it has evolved for the better. It has simply evolved to be bigger and, if anything, more punitive over time.
And who benefits from this system that's locking up so many people, more than 2 million people incarcerated, but more than 10 million people under the supervision of the correctional system, so that we end up having about 5% of the world's population, but housing 25% of the world's prisoners. We incarcerate a higher percentage of our citizens than any country in the world. That ought to frighten us.
The reason why criminal justice reform is so difficult is because so many people have financial interests in the system. We have basically monetized our criminal justice system from top to bottom. Pretty much every aspect of incarceration generates profit for somebody. So you have private companies that manage prisons like CC and Geo Group. You have private companies that provide medical care in prisons such as Corizon or Wexford Health. You have companies that provide commissary services for a fee in prisons such as Keefe, canteen services. You have companies that provide paid or for-profit transportation services for prisoners like TransCore. And I can go on and on. There's simply no end. If you want to send monies to prisoners, you have to use a service called JPay, which charges a fee. If you want to accept phone calls from prisoners, which is a huge $1.2 billion industry in the United States, you have to pay extremely inflated phone rates from companies such as Securus or GlobalTel or CenturyLink. So, again, every aspect of our prisons and jails and justice system is in some way connected with companies that profit and generate revenue from our criminal justice services. And what that does is it provides a monetary incentive to continue our justice system as it is and to not reform it, to keep as many people locked up. Because the more people you lock up for longer periods of time, the more money you'll make.
The idea in the free market is that, through competition, we can lower costs and also increase quality. The challenge with private prison companies is, and especially when you're putting private business in the realm of the criminal justice system, is that principle doesn't quite shake itself out. And from my perspective and the perspective of the Justice Policy Institute, big business should not be part of a justice system that is, supposed to be administering justice to people and has the authority to take rights away from individuals. Because in the end, what you see is for big business and private companies, the only way that they're able to increase their revenue is by having people come to their facilities, having them stay longer, and having them come back.
We have embarked on an over-incarceration binge in the United States that goes back decades. We basically have more prisoners than we can house in our existing public facilities. So the solution to that for government officials, rather than perhaps investing in alternatives to incarceration or revisiting our sentencing laws or making criminal justice reforms or addressing parole policies or any of these other beneficial things that might actually help improve the system, have decided instead to simply contract with private prison companies because they have the beds. The private prison industry is primarily controlled by 4 companies, and that's Corrections Corporation of America, or CCA, based in Nashville, the GEO Group, which is based in Boca Raton, Florida, Management and Training Corporation, or MTC, out of Utah, and CEC, which is based out of New Jersey. Tom Beasley was one of CCA's co-founders back in 1983, and along with Dr. Krantz and T. Don Hutto, formed Corrections Corporation of America, which is, again, based in Nashville. And Mr. Beasley was a political powerhouse at the time. He was a former chair of the Tennessee Republican Party and had managed the campaign for then Governor Lamar Alexander, now U.S. Senator Lamar Alexander. And Beasley has a lot of political connections, a lot of political pull, and he really used that to exert CCA's influence, particularly in Tennessee. So soon after CCA was formed, just a few years later, CCA made a bid to basically take over Tennessee's entire prison system. And that did not get a lot of traction, so CCA tried again in the late 1990s in a much more formidable attempt to take over almost all of Tennessee's prisons with a lot of political pull and support. But that effort also was fought back by a coalition of groups, organizations, and activists that were opposed to prison privatization.
One of the things that private prison companies have done is they've gone into small towns around the country and they have said, we can help inject, capital into your community by building this prison. It'll provide jobs and these things. And I know a number of people who are really working on campaigns to fight back against this premise because, I understand that in small rural communities, jobs are important, but prison jobs are not the jobs that these people want, and particularly private prison jobs, because they're not paying as well. They don't offer the same benefits. They're not really focused on taking care of their employees in the same way public facilities generally are.
Private prison companies have been implicated in the passage of laws, the enactment of laws that increase criminal penalties, things like truth in sentencing and 3 strikes laws, mandatory minimums, and so on. There's no real smoking gun that connects them, largely because a lot of this advocacy and lobbying has been done in private, behind closed doors, through organizations such as ALEC, or the American Legislative Exchange Council. And the nation's 2 largest private prison companies, CCA and GEO Group, were both members of ALEC for a number of years. In fact, CCA co-chaired ALEC's Criminal Justice Task Force at the time when laws such as truth in sentencing and 3 strikes laws were passed as model bills by ALEC and then distributed to a number of states, which then enacted those bills into law.
And so, while we don't have that, that fine link between there, it only would make sense that in the drafting of the legislation, the 2 companies that would benefit the most from these pieces of legislation that would likely increase the number of people in prisons would be, advocating for the passage of this legislation and writing it to craft it to ensure that they have an increase in their market share.
So companies like CCA, state publicly, oh no, we don't do that. We don't lobby for harsher penalties or so on. But at the same time, they state in their annual reports filed with the SEC that risks to their business model include things such as sentencing reform or changes in parole policy or immigration reform. So these things that we might consider beneficial from a societal standpoint, fewer people in prison or reforming our immigration system or reducing penalties for certain substance abuse, nonviolent crimes, companies like CCA see these as an actual business threat because it impacts their ability to make money to generate corporate profit from incarcerating people.
And one of the myths, I guess, that I like to debunk for people is, this money is actually taxpayer money that's being used in terms of providing the revenue, right? Because what these private prison companies do is they contract with states or the federal government to provide this service on behalf of the government. So what the government does then is write a contract and pay a per diem rate per inmate per day for the private company either to manage an existing facility or to have them held in a facility that the private prison company built and manages on their own. So it really has an impact on taxpayers, and it's your money essentially that's funding this system, and funding this system that's using every means they have available to them through lobbying, through campaign donations, through networking and building associations to increase their market share, so that they're taking more of the market share of prisoners in this country and taking more taxpayer dollars instead of having the state or the federal government in charge of that.
CCA spends about $1 million a year on the federal level alone to lobby federal agencies and the houses of Congress on criminal justice and immigration-related issues, and both companies also make a substantial amount of political campaign contributions. Last year, CCA, I think, made over $700,000 in contributions nationwide to influence politicians with regard to private prison issues and private prison laws. So both companies still have an extensive amount of political power and the ability to influence our criminal justice system from a political perspective, which, when you're dealing with for-profit companies, is a rather frightening concept.
But there's a lie in the private prison. The private prisons have argued that they can save the state money, and that's not been proven at all. So CCA wrote letters to 48 governors in this country saying, we would love to take over any of your prisons, and the deal is if we take over one of your prisons, you have to guarantee a 90% occupancy rate for 20 years. What does that mean? I mean, that's guaranteeing that we're going to keep coming up with crimes so that we can fill the prison. I cannot believe it's legal to do that, but apparently not. And they had some folks who bargained with them and have now given them those assurances. But massive studies have been done to look at the cost savings. And CCA and GEO and the rest of them cannot prove that it has been any cheaper, and it for sure hasn't been as safe or as effective. And then you have to ask, how does that work if you have a prison that benefits when people come back into the prison system? Really, you think they're going to do a good job of trying to make sure folks can make it once they get out? And I don't see the incentive there. They only have an incentive for increasing the number of things that count as a crime, lengthening prison sentences, making it virtually impossible to survive any kind of probation or parole, and then scooping up folks right back again and making sure they don't have the skills, the tools, the resources, the support they need once they are released back into the community.
The Quakers started prisons in the 1800s, and they started prisons with the intent of getting the criminal to change his way. Okay, well, what they seen was, okay, that it did not help the prison change his way at all. It actually made him more vengeful, more aggressive, more angry, and that's when they started to implement programs or structures to change the way of thinking. Well, somewhere along the way, someone seen that this was a very lucrative market, and that it didn't matter if anybody made a prison change his way or not. We're making money.
Everybody knows about the license plates, but we didn't know that all furniture produced for schools, all school furniture, those desks that your kids sit at every day, the desks that the teacher sits at, produced by prison labor. But now with the influx of private industry being able to buy out prison labor, so certain companies such as Microsoft, such as Victoria's Secret, such as Boeing, such as various other textile industries, which, I mean, this is highly skilled work, right? This is not, put it in the A pile or put it in the B pile. Like, they have to be taught how to do this. And it's like, so you do this highly skilled work for 17 cents an hour. That's free labor.
If I can work for Wilson's Leather inside the prison system for 50 cents an hour, what changes that when I get out of prison except that you able to say that, well, we don't hire ex-felons, but I worked for 5 or 10 or how many ever years as an employee in the prison system, it was okay.
It's funny that a person can have a job of doing certain work within prison, but when they get out, they can't get the job. You could talk about all these companies like Target, banks like Wells Fargo, AT&T. The list can go on, Victoria's Secrets, and they can make those products while they're in prison. But when they come out, you're criminal. You can't make these. So I could pay you 19 to 25 cents while you're in prison. But when you come out, there's no job for you.
We talk about, where are American jobs going? They're going to China, they're going to Sri Lanka, they're going overseas, they're getting our jobs, they're taking our wages. And the reality is that the jobs are actually here in the United States. They're just behind, barbed wire and in prison industrial complexes across the country.
And I think that's the bigger thing that's outplayed. The value of people, how that deals with violence, how does that deal with gun violence, how does that deal with children's poverty, and again, how does that go back to this prison industrial complex of where we don't no longer see people as people made in God's image. We see them as bodies used for the purpose of commodity, that become commodity for the purpose of profit.
According to the 13th Amendment, slavery was abolished except for in prisons. A lot of prisoners don't even have a clue that they are a legalized slave once they commit their crime and they're found guilty. That according to that amendment, that they've signed up for a herding of human cattle.
When you're in the system, the prison system, they make money off of you. I've had phone bills just from the prison system on a monthly basis. My phone, regular phone bill, has been at least $50 extra a month. That's just locally. When my son was further off, my phone bill was a whole lot more. It's sad because the system is making money off the family members.
I have 3 brothers locked up right now, and my dad is locked up right now. I have one of my brothers that is paroled out at my house right now that's struggling to find a job. And I'm having a hard time because he's having a hard time. I have to help him go to this place and talk to his probation officer and talk to the parole board, and it's kind of an invasion of my privacy too, because they have to keep checking my house and making sure he doesn't go this place and make sure he doesn't do this. But it's like I'm kind of on parole with him. What if we wasn't there and we went to go spend a night at my mom's house, and the night they come? That means that he's going to get locked up, but also I'm going to get charges pressed against me because I wasn't at home at that time. So how can you help your child when you're incarcerated? How can you be there for your child, but you're incarcerated, but they want you to be there for your child? Right. How can you do 2 things at one time?
You can't be. You're one person.
Speaking for myself, I read all about zero tolerance policies. I had the legal language down. I understood the economic breakdown, and then I went into the schools. It's basically like we're prepping young people for, it's baby prison, prepping them, getting them institutionalized to go into the prison industrial complex. They come into a school. They are, strip searched. They have to go through metal detectors. Then they go into a classroom that is bars on the window, very dim lighting. Some of these buildings haven't been updated since the 1950s. You talk about zero tolerance policies in the school, push out to parents, teachers, and the school administration, and to students themselves, and they go, yeah, that's a really bad problem, But what's even worse? I come to school every day, but I didn't have a place to stay or take a shower last night, and then my classmates started making fun of me because I kind of smelled, and so I hit him in the face, and then I got expelled. Well, then hitting him in the face and getting expelled is a symptom of the problem, but the problem was that you're homeless.
You know, these zero tolerance, this cradle to prison pipeline, these feeders into the prison system are not acts of God. They are political and economic decisions, and they're immoral, and they ought to be illegal.
So zero tolerance policies are a series of policies enacted starting in 1994 under the Clinton administration. And they were modeled after drug trafficking policies that came out of like the DEA and stuff. And the immediate concern was, well, drug dealers and drug cartels are using children throughout schools as drug mules. Like schools became a drug route of how to pass drugs along from maybe one entity to another. So he said, okay, we have to stop that. So immediately there was a zero tolerance policy if a child was caught with drugs or weapons on school grounds. Immediate expulsion. And then, you know, once school mass shootings occurred, there was this panic. There was this panic in Congress and said, okay, we have to make it much stricter. I said, okay, all right, fine. So one striking out, and now we can bring in the judicial system. So it's not even just you get kicked out of school and now you may face jail time. Okay, still, everybody was kind of on board. Then, slowly but surely, the Clinton administration started to put police officers in school and force state governments to adopt these policies because if not, they would lose federal dollars. Well, schools started to kind of manipulate and rewrite these zero tolerance policies to fit their own agenda. If you write your zero tolerance policies to include dress code, poor or bad behavior, or even something as small as having a cigarette lighter on campus, well then you wiped out your lowest 10% of students and you immediately raise your test scores. And not to mention that, but now we've just criminalized them because we've allowed for police officers to come into the school and we've allowed for zero tolerance policies to be criminalized. So now bad behavior such as sucking your teeth or rolling your eyes, or even like slamming a book against the desk, which is poor behavior, don't do it, is now criminal behavior. I can't think of a better parallel to our prison industrial system than our education system as it stands here in America. We have to do better for our young people. There is no other option. Because if not, then this entire country, outside of the select few, will consist of brown, black, and poor bodies being shuffled in and out of prisons for their cheap labor and for the dollars they bring in for the state, because it's cheaper to institutionalize them for small drug offenses and for mental health and for petty crimes than it is to give them, you know, rehabilitation services, because drugs is a public health concern. It's not a criminal act, but it's treated like a criminal act in this country. You know, mental disease is a health concern, but we treat it like it's a criminal act in this country. And bad behavior is sometimes just bad behavior, but we treat it like criminal acts in this country. And then when they come out after serving erroneous time for ridiculous charges, we then still shun them and we still shut them out from possible opportunities and prospects of growth. And then we push them back in. And we push them back in. And we pull them out. And then we push them back in. It's a constant tug and pull. But these are people. You know what I mean? Like, these are not objects. It's not cattle that is moved from one place to another. These are human beings with feelings and emotions and families and hopes and dreams and aspirations for themselves. And prison wasn't it. I guarantee you that.
I was walking down the street and one stopped, spotlighted me and asked me what I was doing and where I was going. and it was only 9 o'clock at night, that's, really demoralizing, and there's really nothing you can do about it. Once they get your number once or twice, you're it. If you're carrying a duffel bag or a tote bag, or a couple grocery bags, and people just kind of look at you like you're homeless, like you fit a profile. You get the funny feeling that they're afraid of you and you're afraid of them as well. If you've been on the street all night, you go somewhere, try to find a public restroom, wash your face off, change your socks if you got any clean ones, and maybe go to the library at 9 o'clock and look at the newspaper and see if there's any jobs in there. Usually, when I'm with other people, it's usually when I'm eating. Other than that, I'm usually by myself. Housing is the big thing. I think a lot of people out here walking around, and you see more and more of these people, and they're younger and younger every year. When you see somebody walking like that, don't be so judgmental because it just might happen to you.
Well, Sullivan County is made up of 3 cities. It's Kingsport, Bluff City, and Bristol, Tennessee. Total population is 153,000 people. So naturally, you're going to have, a little bit more of everything. But the population runs on average 700, 750 daily. They say crime's going down, but at the same time, when I look in the jail over there, the population's going up. I think probably in your first few years of law enforcement, it's law and order. You're going to get them, put them in jail, and the crime's going to go away. Well, it don't. And after you've been in law enforcement a number of years, and especially get up about 15, 20 years, you start seeing a lot of times it's the same people over and over. Recidivism is kind of a big word to a lot of people, I guess, but basically it's just those people just keep coming back. I would hate to sit here and think that 700 people that are in my jail today are going to be back again years from now, next week, and they're going to always keep coming back. I have hope that some of those people will turn their life around.
I will probably in my court hear 500 to 750 violations of probation a year, and I handle just in general about 1,500 cases a year. So you can get a pretty good idea that a majority probably of the individuals that I deal with placed on probation reoffend.
Over the last 18 years as a prosecutor, I've looked at a lot of pre-sentence reports, probation reports, and there's a common thread in the people that I see that are in and out of our system. And one of the things is basically the lifestyle that the people have. And some of this starts at onset at childhood. I see folks generally that come from dysfunctional homes, often single-parent homes, where there's a history of drug addiction, alcohol abuse, lack of education, and dependency on government, lack of employment history. And those are the kind of backgrounds that we see of people that continue in and out of the system. And I would say at the heart of all these problems are drugs. Drugs are a common denominator. People that are addicted to drugs create a lot of crime, whether it's a DUI, whether it's a domestic assault, whether it's a robbery, whether it's the sale or distribution of drugs, whether it's identity theft, burglaries, all of it comes back to drugs.
I just felt like no matter how hard I worked or how hard I tried, I just couldn't get on my feet because I had all these obligations here and there and everywhere. And so I resorted to selling drugs to make ends meet. It was something that I knew and I knew I could do, and it was easy money, so I resorted to selling drugs. And whenever I started selling drugs, I started doing drugs. Whenever I went to jail, it was just like a wake-up call. I was so young and naive that whenever I started doing drugs, it just took me to a place to where the things that I was doing wrong, I didn't see as wrong because I was really strung out. When you're addicted to drugs, drugs kind of rule your life. Nothing else matters.
people are going to still reach out for drugs, either for profit or for an antidote to whatever's eating them up inside. And so there are bigger forces that have to be addressed to fix, I think, ultimately the core of the drug problem, which is that we have a society that thinks drugs is the answer. Until we have a society that realizes that's not the answer, we're going to continue to have drug problems regardless of the amount of punishment and the amount of time people get.
If you were convicted of a felony, and if you're going to prison, you were convicted of a felony, you certainly lose. There's a long list of rights that you lose. There's lots of professions that you can't have, and so lots of employers have just a policy against hiring individuals that are convicted felons.
Well, of course, offenders coming out to probation once convicted of a felony, there are obstacles that they're going to have to overcome. A lot of them have never had employment. They have to check that they've been convicted of a felony. There are companies that will not hire once they check that. A lot of them, as a result of lifestyle, have lots of tattoos, and a lot of employers automatically see that as a negative and would not want that person working for their organization. A lot of them have lost their driver's license. They may either have a lot of traffic offenses, unpaid tickets, and so getting to and from employment's a problem, getting to and from probation's a problem, and in rural communities like this, there's not a lot of public transportation.
There aren't many young people in this city, in Kingsport, Tennessee, a fine city, who have been criminalized as a result of using drugs. Their lives have been ruined. And they haven't been ruined necessarily because they used the drug, but because they got caught and they got labeled and they got in the system and they can't get a job. They no longer can have a normal life. So if you get a felony, nobody's gonna hire you. And if you can't get a job, how you gonna eat? How you gonna have a family? How are you gonna raise a family? I mean, it's anybody who has any sense at all understands that. I mean, if you don't have a chance, then you got some problems.
We put people in prison, we put them there for a very long time. They become institutionalized often because they've been behind bars, and the world has moved so quickly, especially technologically, while they've been behind bars. Then they come out, we expect them to somehow find a job, reintegrate, get back into their family situation, whatever it was, and sort of adjust and be normal. And I think we're very impatient and very unforgiving in helping people make that transition. The barriers to reentry are so enormous and so stacked against the person that it's actually surprising the recidivism rate isn't higher.
He has no job, but they assign them to a probation officer. They tell them you have to go see them, and then you have to pay $45 or whatever the fee is. Well, if you're out of jail, you don't have a job, who foots the bill? You pay it, or else you're considered in violation, and then what happens? Going back to jail. If they don't have the money, somebody has to pay that money. And 99% of the time, it's either the family or they find themselves right back in the same situation, back here selling drugs or doing whatever it is to make the money so that they can stay out of jail.
It's not that anybody likes being in prison. Everybody wants and dreams about going back into society. It's whether or not they can actually survive in society. So it's not that they have a desire to stay in prison. It just may be that that's the only place that they can manage.
I know society perceives they get 3 hot meals, they get this, they get this. But our facilities, and a message that I would like to send, are not idealistic. They're generally overpopulated, overcrowded. There's internal politics amongst the inmates. Officers do their best to maintain the safety and security of the facility and put the governmental interests of the facilities first. But with dwindling resources, today's prison system, today's county jails, processing centers, that is no place to be. And I can't really think why and understand why an individual would truly, at heart, want to remain in that system. But many are simply because they get caught up in the wheel and they can't get out. And the opportunities to get out and the programs in the hands that can help them back onto the right track are diminishing. And they're diminishing with time.
We don't offer a lot of support for them once they're out. And that is exacerbated by longer sentences, because when an inmate serves longer sentences, then the likelihood of them having a support system in place upon their release is less. And unfortunately, just like the education system, one of the first things that's cut in the prison system are rehabilitation and educational programs. So we focus, and rightfully so, we focus primarily on custody and control because that's what they're there for. But we're just building a bigger problem for ourselves, because in the future, if we don't rehabilitate or if we don't give them skills, they're just going to come back. And if you have these same people coming back and then you have newer generations coming up without solving the problems that are within society, our prison population is just going to keep growing and growing and growing.
I am an ex-felon of the Tennessee Department of Corrections. I served 16 years and 9 months of a 23-year sentence. I went to prison at the age of 16. I've never paid a phone bill, a light bill. I've never owned a car. I didn't get my license till I was 33 years old. So there's no history, no documentation of my existence outside of a birth certificate and a social security number. And without documentation and a history, in this society, you're nobody. You send a 16-year-old kid to prison without any format to develop themselves, without any guide, without any curriculum, and you leave them to sit for 17 years. And they wonder why the recidivism rate is so high. I've put in for part-time jobs to try to earn extra income because I have no credit score. They told me that my qualification levels did not meet their needs. And it rung back to what the prison officials told me a week before my parole hearing, was that I was unemployable because I was uneducated. That's the culture of rejection. If I don't carry this card with me at all times, I go back to prison immediately. If they call my house in the middle of the night and I don't answer, I go back to prison. If I get a speeding ticket that I don't report to my parole officer, I go back to prison. We're losing the war on drugs. The statistics prove it. Harsher sentences, mandatory minimums have not decreased the crime rate. It has not dropped. But the politician's stance is always the same. Get tough on crime. We won't tolerate it anymore. Lock them up and throw away the key. What you're doing is you're locking society in the downward spiral.
So you might listen to all of this and you might say, I don't care. I would rather have people behind bars than have these people roaming the streets and threatening myself and my loved ones. 2 million of your fellow Americans are in prison right now. 7 million are under some form of correctional supervision. And tens of millions have gone through the system. Then there's hardly anyone who is not touched by incarceration. And if your prison system is not turning out people better than they were when they went in there, then you are suffering as well. Wouldn't your self-interest actually be served better by having a system that doesn't just punish but also helps to support people pull their lives together and get on a more meaningful track for themselves and for the community as a whole, which includes you?
When the darkness inside is too deep to bury and hide, then I wish you were here to light the way. But no matter how much again and again, like an angel in disguise under the Tennessee skies. I'm just an outcast, tossed aside by the wind, doing the very best I can to find myself a friend who can help one by one undo the sad things I've done. And even though I paid the price, feels just like I'm being punished twice, like an angel in disguise under the Tennessee skies. I'm just an outcast, tossed aside by the wind.
You know, the cost to a county, according to which county it is, it averages between $48 and $62 per day per inmate. If you're going to spend $62 a day and put somebody in a box and shut the gate on them, might it be better to put them into a box that's got a treatment algorithm attached to it? Probably.
Let me background a little bit what got us into this. Of course, everybody wants to be tough on crime. We want to be tough on drug users, people that sell drugs and everything, and that's the reason we're spending $300 million more dollars. We felt like that was the way to go, and we've done it. We increased every type of drug offense that was on the state books, locking people up longer. We've spent $300 million more dollars, and I don't think anybody that's looking at it that we've got any less drug problem today than we did when we started this 5 years ago. The only way we're going to get rid of the drug problem, the people that are involved in that, we're going to have to give them a hand up. We're going to have to, remove that stigma or whatever the reasons that are causing them to go that route. We're going to have to look at that because we can't just keep locking people up.
We stand with you today on the grand opening of the first statewide residential recovery court in the nation. That is big news, people, and you should give a round of applause to everybody who was announced who worked on that.
There's a certain degree of frustration about how many people, once they're out of prison, end up coming back. And there's no question that when you look at residential recovery programs like this, it can cut the rate severely. And so we think that's important both for the health of our citizens, for the cost of our correction system, and for making certain that we make this a safer place.
I think this drug court represents a new model for Tennessee in terms of how we look at crime and substance abuse, is that we can't lock everybody up. For those that really need treatment, that need an opportunity to work on who they are and give them an opportunity to change, we need to support that. So we're not being soft on crime. What we want to do is continue to be smart on crime and invest the resource in the best manner that will make Tennessee a safer place to live and work.
There's several different kinds of drug courts, and a lot of people don't understand that. They're what they call outpatient drug courts. And we are one of the very few residential drug treatment programs in the country. And that is strictly for people who are on their way to prison. If they were not here, they would be in prison. All of them have done jail time before, and they're all hardcore addicts. So it takes long-term treatment to help them.
They're sharing a lot of information about things that happened to them in their past. And the only way they can do that if you're not surrounding them sometimes with gray walls that make them feel like they're in prison. We want this to be their home because they're here anywhere between 18 months and some of them 2 to 3 years in this program. Everybody that's in the program, regardless of whether they're in outpatient or inpatient portion of the program, they come here and judge calls the docket, calls each individual's name. And so each time an individual stands up, he will let them know how they're doing, or if they're not in compliance, he will let them know that too. But it's so important to know, the judge really cares about me. He knows what's going on. He knows everything about what they're doing out there, if they're testing positive, if they're not, if they're in compliance. And it says a lot to say, here I've got somebody that really cares about how I'm doing.
A lot of times we don't know we're doing something wrong. I mean, you think that right and wrong is something just so easy to know, but no, a lot of times these old behaviors come out of nowhere and you just don't even realize you're doing it. Sometimes the consequences are very funny, sometimes they're hard, but whatever it takes, that's what this program is about, is change. So whatever it takes to change, I'm gonna do it.
This recovery court and this whole movement to try to treat these people to reduce recidivism, it's not just for them, it's for my family and people that work here and their families, because these are people that are out on the streets. They're driving, they're stealing, they're beating people up, they're doing all these things. So, we're not just trying to help them, we're trying to prevent others from getting hurt. If you go out and ask, 9 or 10 people on the sidewalk or at one of the shopping centers in town and ask them what problems do we have in Hawkins County, nine of them are going to say prescription pills. Everybody knows what the issues are, and we finally have some people that are willing to put forth some effort instead of complaining about it to do something about it. So I'm excited. I think things are going in the right direction, and I think we got some good people that are willing to work hard to make a difference. So.
I'm a retired teacher, administrator from Hawkins County Schools. In my first few months, weeks of retirement, I discovered the Appalachian Dawn documentary of what happened and what God did in Manchester, Kentucky. From that, we have organized our own Expecting God's Help group of people who are interested in making a difference in Hawkins County and doing something about the drug culture that we have that's devastating our whole land.
As we began with Expecting God's Help, one of the things we wanted to be very clear about is that we're not at war with anything or anyone. We're really about bringing transformation and hope, and saying that, and reminding people that there is a way out of this life of bondage and addiction and struggle.
We see on a pretty regular basis deaths from overdoses. And let me assure you, the loss of one child is one too many.
One of my best friends as a child and all through school became addicted to Oxycontin, and I watched that drug destroy his life. Other people just saw an addict, but I saw my friend, and I saw a man who was being devastated by this addiction.
But the addiction can be helped. People have to want the help, first of all. In my opinion, our drug court is the answer to that help. I have had the privilege of attending some drug court meetings, and I have to say they're wonderful. Yes, we have some people who mess up. We all mess up sooner or later, somewhere along the way. But it's wonderful to see the look in their face when they've been clean for some time and they know there's hope out there. And drug court gives that hope.
Actually, we start working with the ladies in jail. So we teach classes in 4 different jails in the region. And we work with the ladies about 4 to 6 months. So we actually start their reentry services and their case planning prior to their release. So actually, they show up here within about 24 hours of being released from jail. They have various charges, usually felonies, but they are all related to addiction.
I used to smoke pot or drink in school, and I always thought, oh, these nasty crackheads, I'll never be a crackhead. Well, next thing you know, I was at a party drinking, so I started snorting a line here and there, coke. A couple of years later, you snort it so much it starts hurting your nose, you get a headache. Well, all my other friends are smoking it. Next thing you know, I am the crackhead.
My goal and my dream and my vision is that when we go in the jails, and we do 7 classes a week locally in jails, and we meet women and they say, I would really like to be in your program whenever I get out. This is what my needs are. Then we say, okay.
I'm so thankful for your class and this opportunity because I feel like I'm strong enough now to go home and be strong for him. And then I know I'm going to have you when I get out for the next 6 months, and I'll have that support. And I feel like, I'm really ready to be able to go home and be strong for him and my children.
Recovering from addiction is very difficult. And so a lot of times relapse and trying again is more the norm. So the idea that somebody's going to go to inpatient treatment, come out and they're done and fixed, that's just not the case. There's a lot more to it. As an active addict, all I wanted to do was get clean. I just didn't want to use drugs anymore and hurt people and go to jail and feel bad. So that's all I wanted. I didn't know that there's so much more to recovery than that. Not using drugs is really a small part of it. Getting your self-respect back, not having to deal with, shame or guilt or, any of that's so much bigger than just not using. It's so big because the place that addicts come from is it's absolutely void of hope.
The boys in our program come here and they have no faith in themselves because they've always been told that they're no good, they're never going to amount to anything. And they don't have faith in other people because the people that were there that were supposed to support them and be there for them and give them a foundation to move into adulthood, they've either left them or used them. They have no hope. They've been in trouble, they've been in state's custody, they don't see anything beyond today and they don't have a lot of hope for today. The whole program centers on a therapeutic milieu. I mean, everything surrounds the work that we're doing with the boy to help him work on some deeper issues. The behaviors are just the symptoms of the issues. We're looking at what is it that's motivating those behaviors, what's behind those behaviors. So when they come here and they're able to work on some of the internal issues that they have, then they're able to attend to their education. And we've been very successful in helping these boys move, not only catch up to grade level, but sometimes move beyond because our educational program is all individually based. And so as they work through some of the emotional issues, then they're able to look at, the math, the English, the history, those types of things that they can start working on. So as they come here, we're trying to instill some faith in themselves and faith in society, that there's good people out there, that there are people that will come alongside of you and care about you. And then as a part of that is hope, that there is a tomorrow and it can be better. You can complete your education. You can find a vocation that you enjoy, not just to get a job, but that you can enjoy, and then that you can have family, that you can contribute to society, and then that they are worthy of love.
Celebrate Recovery is a 12-step faith-based recovery program that meets every Sunday night, and we've been meeting now for almost 8 years. And it addresses a lot of different needs that people have with chemical dependency, codependency issues of loved ones and family members. Just life hurts in a lot of different ways from sort of A to Z. And we have a program of serving a light meal to people. And then we have a large group time where we have a teaching from one of the steps or one of the recovery principles. On an alternate Sunday, we'll have someone who shares some of their story about how they've managed their recovery in whatever area of hurt or habit or hang up that they've been experiencing or struggle with. We now have, for the most part, with the exception of maybe Saturday, I think you can find a recovery group every night of the week.
You know, I hit it well, so I thought, until it became, you know, it was once in a while, and then it was once a week, and then it was 2 times a week, and then it was every day, and then it was every day, all day, to the point when I stopped, I had a $400 to $600 a day habit. And that's when I hit my bottom. The bottom being that I lost everything because of my drug use. I lost a husband. I lost a career of 24 years in ophthalmology. I lost my home. And I became homeless. What so many people don't realize is that drugs and alcohol do not discriminate. It doesn't have to be someone that they call the thug under the bridge or the dreads of life. It's real life people that sit in our churches, that we talk to, that we interact with, that it can happen to. I didn't wake up one day and say, hey, I think I'm gonna be a drug addict, then I think I'm gonna be homeless. It just happened. Yes, and I will take responsibility for choices I've made. And there have been some pretty wrong, bad choices. And to this day, there are consequences that I still suffer from.
A lot of us wrote down our junk, and we're burying it today. This is junk of 2013, and next year we'll bury our junk of 2014. It's about dealing with our insecurities and all of our weaknesses and battling our flesh. You know, the Junkyard Revival, like I was just mentioning, has become about so much more for me personally as well. My own father was once a homeless person, and he abandoned his family. When I was a child, I didn't know my father. If I saw a homeless person, a homeless man with a tin cup or going through the trash can, I remember I just wanted to scream out, you know, why can't you be better? What's wrong with you? And this was for my own father more than anything. Why couldn't you be a better man, the father of my dreams? And now, whenever I see a young child, I see my own son, and I see a young man one day that I'm going to have to face and answer those same questions to. I want him to yes, understand that there are negative consequences for negative behavior, but also I want him to see that every time you fall down, every time someone pushes you down, and those things will happen, that you just always get back up and move forward. Just get back up and move forward. And I want him to rise above his mother's past the same way she did.
My name is Carla Perkins. I'm the owner of Blackbird Bakery here in downtown Bristol, Virginia. We've been open for 5 years. We have an employee staff of around, I think, 23 people now. It's a thriving business, and actually we've seen a lot of increases just in the month of July alone as we went to 24-hour service. Really, my shop wouldn't be as thriving and open today if it weren't for some of the guys that did come out of prison that come to work for us. They're some of the best workers we have. They're long-term employees for the most part, and you will find that they work harder and really come with a lot of skills to the table. So, and some they may have learned even in prison. So it's really helped us.
In the early 1970s, John Hay and several men from this church, as well as other churches, began a prison ministry in the local county jail. It had sort of 3 components to it. Sometimes some of the groups would meet with men and they would do crafts together. There was also another group that would do a Bible study. And there was another group that would work with the men to help them attain their GED There were also a group of ladies from various churches who would do the same thing in the women's prison as well. But what John Hay began to recognize in the early days of his Bible study was that you had all kinds of different segments of the prison system society, and you had some people who really weren't hardened criminals, but then they're placed into a prison system where, if they weren't a hardened criminal when they came in, they can be when they come out. And maybe there's a better way, a more efficient way of dealing with the prison society that wouldn't allow that to occur.
At intake, when the offender comes into the program, he's normally sent here by the justice system, and we have to start rebuilding their life from the ground up.
And then I ended up getting caught selling drugs and got an 11-year sentence and went back to prison. And the more I stayed in prison, the more I hardened my heart against authorities and thought, why me? Why'd I always get caught at everything? And I got back out and began to sell drugs again. And this time I started to use them.
We have 3 halfway houses on campus. One is the Hosanna House for females, which houses 42 female offenders. One is the Brown Annex, which houses 14 offenders, probation and parole offenders. And one is the Hay House itself, which houses 26 offenders.
I got caught for drinking and driving and went to jail for quite a while, actually. I spent a year in Bluntful, and I kept telling them that I needed some help, that I needed some kind of program that would help me, not just to kick me back out and let me do it again, that I needed help. So they offered me this program, and that's how I became to come at the Hay House. Was when I was released from Bluntful, I came to here, and I stayed here for 6 months. And I've done everything that a person needs to do to better themselves.
In Sullivan County, if there was no John R. Hay House, no Brown Annex, no Hosanna House, the offenders would be either placed on probation or they would go directly to the prison system.
Like, love is pain. That's, when you come to jail, love is pain because it kills you being in there away from your love. They said my bullet holes are pretty much my rise and fall. Everything I've gained, I've lost it all. Self-made because, I grew up, I made myself who I am, Yeah, I've gone from here all the way down to the tops of my feet, and on the tops of my feet I got to stand alone, because when you're in jail, you're pretty much standing there all by yourself, Yeah, I got plenty of them. I've got them everywhere. I wished I could take them off. A lot of them.
I lost jobs, I've lost my home, I've lost almost everything that I've ever bought from the time I was 16 and first worked. And I lost it all because whenever I came here, my roommate, pretty much took it and split because I was here and she was there with it. So I came home to nothing again for the second time. You just have to get sick of losing it. You have to get tired of letting the people that you care about down and quit pretty much lying to yourself and to them too, because you can't tell them you're going to do it. And even though you have good intentions, as they say, the road to hell is paved on good intentions. I mean, you can't just want it to happen. You have to actually mean it and try for it.
The reason that we believe that the residential facility is so important is because once they come here, they are already failing in the community. They do not have what they need to make it as productive members in the community. What we do is try to provide the needs that they have. 3 meals a day, clothing, shoes, job placement, the ability to earn money and pay what they owe, random drug screenings, very close supervision, 24-hour-a-day supervision, treatment on campus, those things that allow them to work in a community of other offenders who are trying to reach that same goal, and that is to escape a prison that they've created for themselves, even on the outside, not necessarily behind prison bars, but the prison that they live in their own world.
know it's cold out where you are. I know the snow is falling fast on the roof of your car, but I got blankets and I got clothes, and I can make a mean fire glow. I can make it so it never stops. So honey, don't lock the front door. Honey, don't lock the front door. Honey, don't lock the front door. I'm coming home. Honey, don't lock the front door. Honey, don't lock the front door.